My today's guest is Helen Appleby, my dear friend. Thank you very much, Helen, for joining me today. So, Helen, could you please tell us more about yourself, please?
Sure. So as you said, my name's Helen Appleby, as you well know. I am an executive coach and a women's leadership trainer, and I am currently finishing my book, which is called The Unwritten Rules of Women's Leadership. So I teach and coach, and basically I teach and coach what I wish I'd known earlier in my career. So before I did this, I came from corporate life and had a 20-year career working in 6 countries and ending up running $1 billion business, running a global business. And that was great, but I guess what I realized along the way was that I loved growing people more than I loved growing businesses and brands. And so set off on this new chapter of my journey to teach what I wish I'd known earlier in my career.
Helen, could you please tell us what has inspired you to write your book?
What's interesting for me is that I guess that warmth that you talk about was really part of my leadership journey. You know, I think it's tough navigating as a woman in corporate life, particularly if you're in, you know, like I was, in all male environments a lot. And I think for a lot of women, you know, they navigate that by being tough. You know, you have to, in some senses, learn to be tough. And for me, what I learned over the years is that I could be tough, but I could also be warm as well. So that was part of my journey. And you know, my journey was really what inspired me to write the book. You know, how do we navigate this as a woman? You know, how do we walk the tightropes? It's definitely different as a woman. And so a lot of the things that I learned, they just didn't teach me on the courses that I went on. And you know, I worked for 2 very large companies.
Yes.
And I honestly, I had my moments of crying in the bathroom and being frustrated and being passed over for promotion, and struggling to navigate. And as I overcame them and as I really learned what I needed to know, I really wanted to be able to teach that and to give back. I really want to make a difference for women who are still navigating. And you've met Ellie,
Yes.
My daughter. I want to make a difference for our daughters too. And for women to be able to bring their whole selves to work and to navigate and succeed and really to have their version of success.
So what is the most common advice that you give businesswomen?
I think honestly there are two areas that I often work with women on where they struggle. And they're really the 2 areas, when you look at the research, that most drive success for women, right? There's 2 things that really drive success, obviously, other than being great at your job, right? Technical skills are kind of, like dentistry. You can be as warm and as lightened as you want, but you have to be a great dentist first of all, don't you? So technical skills are really important, but there are 2 things that really help people succeed, which I help women on most frequently. The first one of which is getting a mentor. Getting advice on the journey. So a mentor is really someone who shares their journey with you and shares their experience with you. And mentors, because they do that, because you don't have to invent everything yourself, because they can share their best practice and the pitfalls and the things to avoid and to do, what happens is they become a career accelerant. So having a mentor helps people succeed. So what I do with women is I ask them to really consider what are the journeys ahead of them on their career. What are their leadership journeys? So, and there's probably 3 or 4 journeys ahead of them. So if I give you an example, for me, when I was in corporate life, I wanted to be really senior in marketing. That would be one journey. And I needed a mentor to help me with that, right? Someone who'd already succeeded in marketing. I also wanted to work internationally. So as you know, I've lived and worked in 6 countries.
Yes.
So how do you navigate that? What's best practice there? How do you get on the list? How do you get considered? How do you, get off to a fast start when you land? How do you manage, your spouse and your children and the move, an international move and the movers and all of that stuff, right? That was another journey for me. And then the third journey was doing all that, as a mum with kids. And how did I do that? And how did I navigate that well? So I really help women identify what their journeys are, and then to look at, okay, who on that journey is on the same journey as me, but is 2 steps ahead of me? Mm-hmm. And how can I get advice from them to help me speed up? So mentoring is one, and for both of us now being entrepreneurs, we know, don't we, the value of mentors on this stage of our journey. The other thing I help women in corporate life with is this whole area of self-promotion. One of the unwritten rules I talk about in my book is there is visible work and there is invisible work, and we are only judged on our visible work. So when I ask women, what is the invisible work that you do? What's the value that you bring, or the results that you deliver, or the work that you do that your boss doesn't know about? And usually that question is met with, with a big sigh, and like, there's so much, if I left, they'd have to replace me with 3 people. I don't like, self-promotion. I don't like selling. And remember that rule. If we're only judged on our visible work, then you're really not getting credit for the value that you bring. And I remember that, and I struggled with that when I was in corporate life. And for me, knowing we only get judged on our visible work, knowing that rule was enough to really help me to start to change. And the other thing that helped me really was to reframe that, making my work visible, not as self-promotion or selling, but as really my job to educate. My job to educate my bosses and my stakeholders on what it was that I did and the results that I delivered. Just help them understand. And then it didn't feel like weird and yucky and inauthentic and uncomfortable anymore, because I can teach, I can explain. So that really started then to unlock opportunities. So I help women a lot with that too, that making their work visible in an authentic way.
This is very fascinating for me, because you see, it breaks a lot of misconceptions, I think, in my head, because you are executive coach, so you work with already very successful women, and I guess many of us would think, well, they are already on top. They achieved a lot themselves. Why would they need additional help? So it's incredible that even on that level, there is this sort of help needed. So how many different kind of hurdles they had to get through to get to that level, and yet they still have to fight to show that they're worth being there.
Women who are already at the C-suite and female CEOs, but I also work a lot with women on their leadership journey. And what you find along the way is, there are levels and glass ceilings that they have to break through. And I agree with you. I'm constantly amazed when I'm talking to, very senior women that there's still, unwritten rules that they're working on and that we work on together. So yes, and in a sense it's always a journey, isn't it? Where sometimes the teacher and always the student is yes. is always, I think, a good attitude to have to keep growing.
Helen, we are both female entrepreneurs. I'm wondering, thinking that probably I had it a little bit, in a way, easier because I'm not coming from this cruel corporate world. But I also have experienced not being taken seriously in business because of being a woman. Just as an example, it happened several times when I was looking for the business to buy, the dental practice to buy. I visited places for viewing and was welcomed with always very polite men. And as soon as we met, it was obvious I'm a woman, this is a man, and I instantly felt that it was like, oh, it's just, you're just a woman. What do you know? It's not the job for you. It's a man's world. Seriously.
Yep.
So it didn't hurt me. It's not what I'm used to. Mm-hmm. Have you often experience that, and is this the story of your clients, of women that you're working with?
Yeah, I see that a lot in corporate life, particularly in environments, like we're both in, where there's, it's male dominated.
Yes.
So that journey to being seen and being heard.
Oh, I have a fantastic example myself. When I was buying a first dental practice in London, in Westminster, from one very lovely gentleman, I went for viewing with my boyfriend. And it was me who was the dentist. It was me who was putting money on the table for that business. And my boyfriend wasn't even a dentist. He was there just to make me feel a bit more comfortable.
Exactly. They spoke to the boyfriend, I bet.
And he spoke to the boyfriend. He did. I don't think he would be able to even remember if I'm blonde and brunette. He just didn't notice me. So I found it very weird experience.
Yes.
But just the proof of what you said.
Yes. So yes, and I think that would resonate with many of us in business, where we've been asked to make the coffee, or take the notes, or being interrupted in meetings. Men interrupt more than women do, but they also interrupt women much more than they interrupt men. So you're right, that journey to being seen and being heard, and also navigating it. For me, the interesting thing is, how do you react in that situation? And how do you still want to buy the practice from him. So you don't want to alienate him, but on the other hand, do you just let him get away with it? I imagine, I don't know, let's check for this. Did you just let him get away with it? You just ignored it?
I ignored it because it was just the first time ever. I didn't know how to behave.
How to handle it, yeah.
Because it made me, deep inside, it made me confused. And actually I wanted to laugh. And I just literally, I didn't do that, but I wanted to say hello, just like, oh, it's me, here, just here. I didn't, but I think I was just more confused than angry or disappointed. I just couldn't find, I didn't know what to think about it.
You don't know how to react. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and we talk about that, and I coach on that. And I guess the answer is to deal with it. I teach women to deal with it, but to deal with it warmly.
Yes.
Right? So, you could, if you were back there then, you could say to him, to be clear, it's me that's buying the business. So could I ask, could you talk to me, please, instead of to my boyfriend? Thank you.
Oh, that would be so satisfactory. You see, now I would do that.
But now we know,
Next time.
We? That's why I teach what I wish I'd known then.
Now, Helen, I would just go just a little bit to my industry. You lived in many countries. You lived. You not only visited. You lived. You worked. That was your life. And I'm just curious about your experience of dentistry. You're British. You live in US now, but you lived everywhere else. So what is your experience in different places? Is there any difference?
Yeah, my journey. I guess, it's an interesting journey, isn't it? Having grown up as a Brit and, very much kind of had British dentists for many years. And then we moved to America 10 years ago. And I guess I've then had, quite a few years of American dentistry. And now, as you know, now every time I fly back to the UK, I come and see you. So it's been interesting. I would say, as a Brit and growing up here, I had good dental hygiene, and I've been really fortunate. I don't have, as you know, I don't have any fillings. But I would say the biggest difference in all of those countries that I've lived in, or all of the 6 countries, is the difference between American dentistry and British dentistry, and just how much more cosmetic American dentistry is. So, when we arrived in the US, it was the time when, I had young kids and they were going through the orthodontics phase, and, I watched them, have braces and palate expanders and headgear and, and really end up with beautiful American teeth. And then embarked on my own journey of, yes, I had healthy teeth before, but I didn't have, the teeth that I have now in terms of how straight they are or how white they are. And, I've heard you talk before about the confidence that gives you.
Yes.
when you don't just get, the basics of what you need, but what you actually want. And, that's certainly been the case with me. Having straighter teeth and whiter teeth has really helped. The other thing I think that's interesting is, and the reason that I come to see you as a patient is I think I'm not really nervous of being at the dentist, but what's really, really important to me as a patient is that I'm listened to. And particularly in the area of, what the dentist does to me when I'm lying in the chair. We lie back like this, don't we? And we're so exposed. And, the dentist's got their hands in your mouth and you can't really speak. And so sometimes even the smallest things like putting the chair back, you're always so careful, aren't you, with me, to tell me. And there's nothing really scary about putting the chair back. But if you don't know it's going to happen and you don't know that suddenly you're going to have cold water squirted in your mouth, that can be like really disconcerting for me. So what I love about, working with you and the guys in the team in your practice is that they do really listen and they never do anything to me that they haven't told me about or asked me about, and that I really feel that I can trust you and your team, and that's really valuable to me.
Thank you very much. That really makes me happy, because that's exactly what I would like other patients to feel. Now, Helen, even recently I met your son, very impressive, very ambitious young man. I'm just wondering, would you like your children to follow you in business? Do you think they will? Do you think they would like to?
Oh, that's a great question, Patricia. So I have a son called Alex, who's 20, and a daughter called Ellie, who's 18. And I guess, corporate life gave me an amazing career. So I would have loved if they'd gone into business. But, they both want to be doctors. And I guess, what drives them for that is that they really want to make a difference. So Alex is really interested in anti-aging medicine, and Ellie's really interested in fertility medicine. So they're on their own journey to make a difference. And it'll be interesting to see, as a woman navigating in medicine, whether Ellie comes up against some of the navigation issues that I had in corporate life. But yeah, we'll see. They're on their own journey, aren't they?
This is really incredible, because she already got such a young person, got to the conclusion that she would like to do something positive, make an impact. This is quite unusual, because people at this age usually are focused on working, and at some point they feel that they have experienced enough to make a difference. And she has already witnessed your journey, and she got to the conclusion so early. So I'm really curious how, where they will end up in few years, if they will follow you or if they will decide to do their own thing. So this will be very fascinating to learn.
See if they end up entrepreneurs like us.
Helen, thank you so much for joining me today. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope we'll see each other again, and maybe we can talk forever.
We could talk longer, couldn't we? Thank you.
And we can
Patricia.
talk about other aspects of being female entrepreneurs again. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.